I got this funny situation in Blazor application hybrid. This is a server side, the server side project. I got my view. My view is supposed to be connected to a ViewModel. I have a DTO that is supposed to be serialized and stock in Azure. And I could have just take the view and connect it to the DTO. The problem is that sometimes in the view, there's some features that I would like to have only in the view and are not related to the database and not in in the DTO. For example, a date, which is date only. So what I decided to do is to take a subclass, to take my DTO, my VM should be a subclass from the DTO, and it should have the extra properties that are needed for the interface in order to accommodate the interface and give the functionalities that are needed. So now I have the DTO that has, for example, in this case, date promise, which is a DateTime, but the VM has a date promise date only, which is date only. And the problem that I had before is that the user wants to be acknowledged that when he didn't put any date. So when I put a required on this annotation required on this property, the view automatically refuses to save as long as you don't have this property field. When you update this property, it would update that property here. And when this property will update this property here, will also update an internal property, which should be date promised date only. In this case, when you set, it will take the date promise, the promise date, and it will put in the variable here, and it will put in the internal variable also. If it's null, then it would not update the date promise. But the get would take from date promised. If the date promised here is null, then it will return null. So the interface would know that the date promise was never updated for the internal variable of the VM. If the date promise was updated, then this variable is returned. And that will make it that if there is a mistake somewhere, then the user will always have the last version of the date that has been entered by the interface. The issue is when the view is bounded to the VM order, since it does not have any binding to the variable date promised, date promise will never be updated. So it's always the default value, which is year one, month one, and day one, which is not compatible with Azure. So the VM is set when you go into when you load the page, he updates the VM with the address by default, and then he does a get of the date promise date only. But this one, since it's null, it was never updated. It would give you the date which is here, which is 111. And then it will set it in interface and it will set it back here. And when it will set it back here, it will erase the null. This is not going to be nullable. And eventually you're not going to have the date. So that's a little bug that I found. To fix that, what I did is completely separated them. when you update this variable, it only updates when you update this property, it only updates the temporary variable that is associated to this property. And when I do a get for the database for the DTO, I make a complete copy of a new DTO order DTO, and I update the date promised in that new instance. And this way I get the complete the current date. In other words, date promised date only is a cache for date promised as long as you didn't ask for the order DTO. Once you ask for the order DTO, then this variable will be updated, and then there's no conflict between the two.